So you want to know how to properly set up your GT86 or BRZ for drifting. Let's talk about it. After this video, you'll have gained some super valuable knowledge without having to spend hours upon hours researching in forums and getting lost in that maze of information. Today we're going to be talking to one of the pioneers in grassroots GT86 drifting, Christian Pratt from Houston, Texas. Christian has spent so much time researching and testing out different parts and setups on this car to see what works best. From cut knuckles to a full PBM angle kit and a little electronic device that adjusts your steering, Christian has tried out so many different setups and is a wealth of knowledge for any beginner out there. As for me, I've spent the last year and a half sticking to my philosophy of not adding any angle to the car during my initial learning phase. Basically, all I did to my car was lower it on BC coilovers and rear lower control arms to fix some of that camber. So this is a perfect video for you guys because I'm going to be putting myself in your shoes and make this video feel like you, a beginner, is at a drift event talking to one of the more experienced guys about the car. We're going to be going over tires, angle, suspension, everything you need to know to get your car set up for drifting. So without further ado, let's give Christian a call. All right, guys, we got Christian right here with us. Like I said, he is a driver in Texas, a GT86 guy, I guess a BRZ guy. And he is going to talk to us a little bit today about his car setup. What's up, Christian?
Hey, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you, brother. All right, let's just get right into it. Not waste anybody's time. Start off with your car setup. So let's start with kind of what everyone should be most familiar with: coilovers. Talk to us a little bit about your coilover setup. What brand you got, the spring rates, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different options out there now, but most common ones out there are probably DC Racing, so that's what I went with. They already have a set of spring rates that are ideal for our chassis, which is 8K all around. Yeah, so far 8K has worked out, and it feels very balanced with this car. So
I agree.
it works.
I agree. All right, so yeah, I ran 8K myself, and I really enjoyed it. But a lot of people are super confused with like the spring rates and stuff. Some people running like 7K, some people running like different staggered setups. Like I know our friend Amani runs, I think 11K in the rear because he's so low. You want to kind of explain that, break that down a little bit for some of the people that don't know about that?
Really, at the end of the day, it comes down to personal preference, I think. But ideally, if you're looking for more grip, in the rear, a lot of people decide to soften up their spring rate, so they'll go with a lower number like 6K, 7K. That kind of allows the car to squat down a little bit. And then typically, for a drift setup, we tend to have a little bit stiffer up front, both to, mitigate any kind of body roll or anything like that if you don't run a sway bar or something. But again, it's all personal preference. And so again, my personal preference is just having a squared setup all around just because the car already kind of has plenty of mechanical grip in my opinion. So again, just what I'm comfortable with, and I think it works.
If you like that real low, super stylish final bout style, then you're going to want to run like something like maybe even 11K in the rear, something a little bit stiffer, just to kind of mitigate that extra squat that the car has when you have those softer spring rates. All right, Christian, so moving on from coilovers, the rear end of your car, what do you got going on in the rear end of your car as far as suspension besides coilovers?
So not a whole lot. There's a few essentials for sure. So you definitely want to have lower control arms in the rear that are adjustable, mostly so that way you can zero out your camber and get the most out of your tire life. Besides that, I personally have the PBM subframe risers, which kind of help out with having the car a little bit lower and straightening out the axle geometry. And it also helps out with, any kind of wheel hop or anything that you might be getting from any play in the subframe when you're doing things like pull an e-brake and, just initiating and getting the car sideways.
Yeah, how was that subframe riser install? I know a lot of people are kind of intimidated.
It's really not as bad as it seems. It is definitely intensive because you have to drop the entire subframe out of the car. So if you have the ability to put it up on a lift, that's definitely ideal. But I've definitely seen people just throw it up on jack stands and spend a day or two getting the entire rear subframe down. That includes the axles, the diff, the wheel hubs, everything basically in the back, the coilovers. All that essentially comes off the car. And then the hardest part is actually getting out the OEM bushings, which there's a bunch of different methods that you can try. Some people burn them out, some people cut them out. Me and our teammate Brad, we essentially tried everything, and then we ended up doing a combination of drilling out the OEM rubber, and then there's two metal sleeves that you have to go through. So then we ended up just using an air saw and cut through those gently, and then eventually was able to pop the whole thing out. So all in all, probably about a day's worth of labor, but can definitely be done.
Cool, man. And then what did you say your lower control arms are?
So I'm personally running Block's lower control arms. You really can't go wrong. There's a bunch of different brands out there. You can even run something like SPC, which is a very very cheap, almost OEM alternative, but they do have some camber adjustment in them as well.
Yeah, that's what I run too.
So
Yeah, I run those
yeah,
SPC.
so
No issues.
definitely a bunch of options out there. Just all really depends on what you want to do, how low you want to get the car, what your overall style is gonna be. So
all right, cool. So anything else in the rear you want to mention?
yeah, so as far as the rest of the rear goes, there's just little tiny things that kind of help stiffen up the rear. So you can do things like the white line diff inserts, which are kind of a quick fix, I would say, for doing solid bushings. It just kind of helps solidify everything without having to do a full, pull of your differential. You can actually do everything while the car is pretty much on the ground almost. That's really about it. Yeah, so other than swapping out axles from time to time, that's not a whole lot going on in the rear. It's mostly stock LSD.
How often are you switching out axles?
That is a good question. They usually last, I would say, probably about 4 to 5 events.
4 to 5 events.
It's all going to be dependent on how low your car is, what axles you're putting in. I'm personally putting in AutoZone and O'Reilly's axles because they keep on having the lifetime warranties on them. So snap one,
go.
swap it out, and then
A little bit of sauce for you
keep
guys.
on
I don't know
going.
about that. There you go.
Yeah, it's the circle of life. They don't have to know what's going on with these axles.
So basically, your axles, they lasted from OEM. Obviously, you didn't start drifting right away. So you'd say those axles lasted on the car as a daily, and then what, like maybe like 5 or 6 drift events, and nothing happened, something like that. So you can expect like 5 or 6 good drift events out of axles if you're not like super crazy slammed low. But yeah, seems like
So
it's just
far,
gonna
so
be
good.
a thing you're gonna have to learn how to get good at, replacing axles, and always have a spare set with you at an event if you want to fix them at an event. And just it's just gonna be a thing we have to deal with, I guess.
Not a hard install at all. I mean, after doing your first 2, you can literally knock them out in like 30 minutes a piece. So having to do a track side's not that big of a fear, but it's always good to have them handy, like you said.
All right, Christian, let's move on to the front of the car and talk about angle. I know you added angle pretty early on in your drifting career, and you've had a lot of experience with all sorts of different stuff, from unicorn like knuckles, cut knuckles from a small company here in the US to PBM stuff, and all the way up to some of the more professional kind of angle and suspension stuff. So yeah, let's just take us all the way back through your journey, because a lot of the guys that are watching this video have no idea what to even do with the front of the car, and are having a lot of the same experiences you probably had when you first started drifting. So just take us to the beginning and teach us everything you know.
Yeah, so these cars, like have horrible stock angles, so it was very challenging to say the least. So honestly, one of the first things that I did was immediately started looking up angle options.
Hey man,
a lot of people say try to drive the car stock, and to that point, I tried. It sucked.
I say that. No, it's okay.
Which is fine. No, I really do believe that it makes you a better driver. But at the end of the day, it all just depends on how
just
fast
fun,
you
bro. We're just having
think you're
fun.
gonna progress. So
it doesn't.
you're right. It is just a game.
You're a great driver.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And I'm here asking you questions because I want to know. I want to know what it's like, and because one day I'm gonna throw angle on my car eventually, and I'm gonna look back to this video and remember what you taught me. So take us away.
Secret sauce.
Give us the sauce, baby.
Yeah, okay. So you got a bunch of different options, though, as far as angle goes. One of the most common things that people try out is going to be the Megan Racing inner tie rods, or I think P2M also has a version of them as well. But essentially, it's just a little spacer on the tie rods, which gives you about like 10 to 15 more degrees of lock, which still isn't a lot, but compared to what you have on these cars to start with, it is quite a bit. The downside of something like that, what that does is it actually lengthens the steering ratio, and so it takes you longer to turn the wheel to get to more angle essentially. And so I found that out pretty early on, and so something that I immediately jumped to next was cut knuckles, because basically what that does is it relocates the tie rod endpoints, which makes the steering ratio shorter. And now all of a sudden you have to turn, less, and you get a lot more, steering rotation.
So you said cut knuckles, right? Cut knuckles is what you did next.
Yeah.
And did you pair that with the extended tie rods, or did you just completely remove those?
So I went ahead and did both, which in hindsight was a mistake, and I'll get to why in a second. But yeah, essentially, if you go ahead and put cut knuckles on there and you put the extended tie rods on there, you're pretty much adding steering angle in two places, right? And so what that does is it causes the steering rod to actually bind, or I'm sorry, the steering rack to actually bind. And so whenever you get to full lock and you try to go back from full lock, it's all of a sudden really hard, and it's kind of a struggle for a lot of people. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to mitigate that. What I ended up doing was actually just taking the extended tie rods out to start with, and then just ran the cut knuckles for a while. That was a decent setup, but I was only actually at that point getting about 45 degrees of angle, and for me and the style of driving I was trying to do, it still wasn't enough. Beyond that, I tried GK had just launched their angle kit, and so I went ahead and picked one of those up, threw it on the car. Easy install to do. We ran into some slight issues with the brackets that they developed not being quite up to par in terms of durability. So I street drove it for like a week, and they actually ended up bending.
What brackets are you talking about?
So they're brackets that actually mount directly onto the knuckle, and instead of essentially a cut knuckle, like I said, it
mounts onto the stock knuckle.
Correct, yeah. So like the cut knuckle, it relocates where that endpoint is. The bracket that GK Tech created essentially does the same thing, but instead of cutting anything, it's literally just something you bolt on. And so with that, it really helps out a lot, because what they went ahead and did was the same geometry that the cut knuckles have, and the difference that the cut knuckles are versus the Megan tie rods is that steering ratio that I was talking about. So with the Megan inner tie rods, it takes you longer to turn the wheel and to get to that full lock, right? But if you have cut knuckles and you have your tie rod endpoint relocated, then all of a sudden, let's say instead of having to turn the wheel like a full rotation, you only have to turn it half a rotation now for you to get the same amount of lock. So your inputs are a lot faster, and that actually helps out when you're transitioning and just trying to initiate and steer in general.
So you went from tie rod to cut knuckle and tie rod, and then you remove the tie rod, and then you put your stock knuckle back on, and then put this GK Tech bracket on.
Correct. Yep. And so from there, we tried out the GK Tech thing. Like I said, it worked pretty well. What they had going on was definitely in the right direction, but it just ended up not being as durable as I anticipated. So their bracket ended up bending, which may have been from me running a little bit more camber than I anticipated. But all in all, they actually ended up making a V2 of their brackets, and so now those are available, and they've actually gone ahead and added additional material that should hopefully prevent that from happening anymore. And I actually went ahead and passed that kit along to one of our other teammates, D-Way, and he's been ripping on it for 4 or 5 events now at this point with almost zero issues.
You passed on the V2 kit or the V1 kit?
Both, actually, yeah. So I had given him the V1 kit because GK Tech went ahead and warranted that stuff for me anyway.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we're really good customer service. If that's an option you guys want to go for, I would definitely still recommend them.
So that's cool, yeah. If you guys don't really want to switch a lot of stuff up, if you don't want to run like some cut knuckles from maybe a company that you don't really know about, you can get this GK Tech V2 set up and mount it onto your stock knuckles, if I'm correct,
right? And the cool thing I'll add about the GK Tech thing is, like you said, it just mounts on. So it's literally an install that you guys can do at home in your garage. It takes 30 minutes. All you need is an angle grinder just to shave down a small little nub that's on the knuckle just to make the bracket fit on there. But aside from that, like I said, it's a super fast install, and it's super reversible as well, because bolt on, bolt off. Cool. So if you decide you don't want to drift or you don't like it, you haven't gone ahead and swapped out wheel hubs and replaced knuckles, all you have to do is just take the tie rods and the bracket back off and call it a day.
Man, I'm learning a lot.
It's a good option for people, for sure.
That's cool. Right, so you passed V2 along and V1 along. Where are you at now in this journey? What was next?
Yeah, so just in the haste of having something that I knew would work without a fault, I just went ahead and bit the bullet at that point in time and just ordered the PBM stuff. So I've got PBM lower control arms up front. I have the PBM forged knuckles, which have additional material underneath the wheel hub, which is essentially roll center correction. So just essentially corrects the geometry of the car and fixes the handling whenever we drop the cars down low. It's got the offset rack spacers. So what that is helpful for is it actually moves the tie rods forward a little bit. So remember I talked about the steering rack binding, at high angle. So what this does is it pushes those tie rods forward, corrects a little bit of the geometry. And now whenever you're at high angle, you no longer have that feeling that the car snaps to full lock and all of a sudden you can't turn it backward. So that eliminates that problem. And now at this point, I think I'm probably getting like close to 60 degrees of angle, which is, as far as I've seen on any kit on the market, that's about the max of what these cars can have. And it's all dependent on your lower control, your lower control arms at that point, a game of clearance and fitment. So. All
right, well, there's a bunch of sauce for everybody. You guys can take that information and run with it, mix and match some of the stuff you talked about and kind of see what works for you guys. Christian, now I know you've done all this work to the front of your car to add angle and adjust the geometry, but there is one thing I want to ask you about that I think a lot of other people don't know about. It's a little bit of a secret, a little bit of a secret. Do you get are you comfortable with sharing with the world your little secret with the steering thing? I mean,
Yeah,
some people know about it, but it's not a huge secret. But talk to
it's
us
not a
about the
huge
steering,
secret, but
the steering adjusting. I don't even know what it's called. Electrical steering. Tell us. Teach us. What is this?
steering assist. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely the secret sauce for this car. So for the longest time, once I put the angle kit on the car, I ran into this weird sensation where the steering wheel got super heavy, and I just thought that was a symptom of adding angle to the car. I had no idea that had anything to do with the power steering. But what actually happens on our chassis is that essentially the electric steering that's in the car, it is dictated based off it's either the RPM or the speed of the vehicle. So essentially, when your vehicle gets up to speed, let's say that you're, going from 0 to 60. Once you get up to 60 miles an hour, all of a sudden it turns your power steering off. And I think the intent behind that was to kind of make the car a little bit more stable at high speeds. The downside to that is whenever we go ahead and initiate and then our mid drift, the car thinks that we're going, 60 miles an hour. In reality, we're, scooting along at 20 sideways, and then we have no power steering because of that. So I was like, there's no way that's, the option that we have. Like, it can't just be a dead end and we have to, deal with this feeling of no power steering. They make a small little control box, and basically what it does is it feeds the ECU a speed signal and says, hey, the car is actually going, let's say 0 miles an hour the entire time while we're mid drift. And all of a sudden you have full power steering. You no longer have to fight the wheel to turn it backward to counter steer. It really makes the car go from feeling like a halfway driftable vehicle to a straight up video game. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, and what the cool thing about it is it comes with a little knob on it, so you can essentially just turn this, steering assist up or down.
So
Similar
it's
to how you would
analog.
turn.
You don't really have to like change anything in the
Right.
tune. Wow.
No, not at all. So
Oh, that's
it
really
literally
cool.
it is truly plug and play. You pop out one of the plugs out of the steering ECU and plug in this little controller box, and then you've
Oh
got a little
wow.
knob that you can adjust, and it's like turning force feedback up on your sim rig. I
Did
mean,
you have to
it's
retune
wild.
the car at all when you put that on there or no?
No, not at all.
Wow.
Like I said, super plug and play. We were honestly, so me and Brad installed them together, and it was kind of funny because we were both shocked at both how stupidly ingenious it was, but
Yeah.
at how well it worked. I mean, we could literally be sitting still. We could press the accessories to turn on in the car, and whenever the accessories turn on, it turns on the steering ECU. And before, if you didn't have the car fully on, you couldn't turn the wheel. But now all of a sudden, we can not even start our motor. We can turn to full lock, just with our fingertips. So
That's crazy.
super
So
convenient just to even work on the car. I mean, it's awesome.
I'm sure there's. You think there's going to be like a downside to that? Like, does that put extra stress on on anything on the car because of that?
I do want to speak on that for sure because from personal experience, I am, and it could be, just maybe I'm desensitized to it already because I have it
Mm-hmm.
cranked to the maximum all the time. But I do almost feel like maybe it's not putting out as much of a steering assist as it once did, and purely just from kind of cooking that motor that's in there because it's essentially just
It's having to work
uh
harder, like at some
yeah,
points where like
it's
mm,
it's just an electric motor that's right beneath
something you'll have
your
to
steering column. So
probably replace eventually. But I mean, it sounds like it's worth it.
yeah, I mean, and
Um,
I think it's maybe a $200 steering column replacement, and it's again something that very simple to work on our car. So I
yeah.
don't think it would be that huge of an issue if it had to come down to it.
So I think everyone's wondering right now, okay, what brand is this? Where do I buy it? And there's actually two of them, right?
Actually there may be more than two of them. I know that there's a company called Wisteria that makes them. So if you guys are actually in the market for one, I know Quinn might still have his for
Mm,
sale.
mm.
So if you want to tag him on here, but the ones that we ended up getting was off of eBay. I can't actually remember the exact company that made it, but if you just Google FRS BRZ86 steering assist controller, it should pop up.
There's like a more expensive one from Japan called Wisteria or something like that. And then the
Yeah,
one that
so I
you
mean, you're
use is
looking
just
at
the eBay one and it's fine.
yeah, I mean, the eBay one was recommended to me by Pablo. Good choice.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, he recommended it because I came to him with the Wisteria one. I was like, "Hey, have you heard about this? Like, this is pretty cool." And he's like, "Nah, man, this is what you want." And so he actually showed me the $50 version, and so I
Oh,
was like,
it's
"Oh, fuck it,
$50?
yeah,
Oh, that's
I'll just
crazy.
throw that out there." So I was like, for
Go, go,
$50,
go.
I might as well just try it and see if it's any good. And it
Oh,
turned
there
out to
you
be
go.
probably one of the best modifications I've done with this car. So
Oh man, that's cool.
definitely worth it.
All right, Christian. So let's move on to camber and tow. I know when we first got this car, we didn't really know anything about camber or tow, what we should be running, what these even mean. negative, positive. So talk us a little bit about your alignment. I know you're not the alignment guy, but you're always very attentive when you're at Texas Tire and Parts getting your alignment. So talk to us a little bit about the ideal camber and toe setup that you've got going on your car.
He is actually probably one of the ones that taught me as much of the suspension stuff that I know. So when it comes to your front camber with our car, I've kind of found that the sweet spot is anywhere between about -4 and -6. Really, the way that you can dial it in, whenever you are mid drift and you turn your wheels, wherever you tend to find yourself, mostly at lock, whether it be full lock or maybe it's only half lock, wherever you find yourself most in drift, that's kind of what you want to base your camber off of, because when you turn your wheels, it's actually adjusting your camber. So as you turn the wheel starts to roll over. So the idea is to add enough camber that just corrects it just enough so it's straight up and down while it's in that sweet spot when you're drifting. And again, that kind of equates on our cars to usually about -4 to -6 degrees. So shout out
That's in the
to
front.
Rudy for teaching me that. Yeah, that's mostly.
And then the rear, we try to zero it out as much as we can, correct?
Yeah, the rear just is going to come down to how much tire life do you want to get out. Some people end up having to run camber just because they want to be the stance boys and have the sick fitment.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you want to maximize your tire life, zeroing out your rear camber is definitely the way to go.
What about toe in, toe out? Do you pay attention enough at Rudy's to kind of be able to explain that to us?
Yeah, for sure. So typically in the front, we tend to want to run a little bit more toe out. And what that does is, one, it will kind of add a slight amount of more angle to your lead wheel, but it's also going to kind of help the car self-steer a little bit as well. So as you transition, it's going to sort of help the car steer itself. As far as any kind of toe in the rear, you actually typically want to have either, zero toe to maybe just a small amount of toe in. And what that's going to do is just kind of give the wheels a little bit more forward bite. And that's going to be what gives you a little bit of extra speed boost, as you're gripping around the track. So,
and do you remember what your front toe is?
Yeah, I want to say that Rudy set my front toe to somewhere like -0.2. If you guys have like a toe plates or anything, that's like, what is that, like a eighth of an inch, maybe something like that. Very small amount.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, small amount of toe out. You don't need a whole lot, but just a tiny bit to kind of make the car feel nice and happy while it's drifting.
All right, Christian, now that we've kind of broke down the car, I feel like everyone at this point, you can set your car up now for drifting. So let's just use this last segment to kind of highlight the kit that Christian just installed on his car, which is the HKS turbo kit. As you know, a lot of people don't like the low power on these cars, and Christian was one of those guys. So he seems to be never satisfied with the power or angle this car puts out. Yeah, talk to us about this kit. What's your experience been with this new turbo kit? Yeah, take it away.
Oh man, it's easy to say that I don't like the low power on it. The low power on the car was super fun, to be honest, and I feel like I wouldn't have progressed as fast as I did if I
I
had
know, I'm just messing
the
with you.
car in its current form. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, the HKS kit was probably one of the coolest things that I've put on this car, just because it really woke the car up. It's actually, truth be told, one of the first boosted cars that I've ever driven in real life as well. So just having that first experience and hearing the flutter of the turbo for the first time was a super awesome experience.
So keeping it in line with kind of what else we've talked about today, once you turbo the car, was there anything you've noticed you've had to adjust on your alignment or angle or suspension, or have you just kind of kept it how you were on stock power so far?
Yeah, to be honest, it kind of worked out, because the way that I set up the car and built it was almost like it was in preparation to turbo the car, when in reality, like, that wasn't actually the intent at the time.
Okay.
But already having a massive amount of angle, and already kind of having the basics like the coilovers and all that stuff out of the way, it really just set the car up to be turboed and then just straight full send. So it worked out really well.
All right, Christian. Well, man, you've come a long way since I first met you. And you definitely passed me in driver's skill. I remember our first training event together. I was doing a little bit better than you, and now you've far
100%.
surpassed me
100%.
now. And I'm just so proud of you and happy to see
Thanks, man.
how much you've just learned about this car. And I know you're still learning, but right now you're a wealth of knowledge for a lot of us. And just thank you so much for sitting down with us today and having a chat.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good talking to you, man.
Yeah, good talking to you too. All right, guys, that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. If you want to keep up with me on Instagram, that'll be right here. And if you have any further questions about setup, or even have anything that you disagree with Christian about on his setup, that's completely fine. As opposed to just directly DMing me or Christian about car setup, just put it in the comments on this video, so this video can act as just a big wealth of knowledge for anyone else that comes across it. So yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate y'all.